The program today. Joining us now, Dr. Laura Miller, family medicine specialist from Hattiesburg Clinic. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Miller.
You're welcome. Morning.
All right, so wanted to have you on to give us kind of an update on this Omicron variant, which, by the way, has been reported as one of the most mispronounced words for 2021, but I think we pronounced it correctly. All right, and it's now there's reports suggesting or indicating, I should say, that the variant has been identified here in the state of Mississippi. It just kind of seems to me, I'm not a scientist, but that we're going to see it in every state. It's just a matter of time, so I don't know why it's such big news every day. Hey, another state has it. I think you can kind of go ahead and write that down and take it to the bank. So tell us what the latest is, please.
So we did our first case yesterday. It was someone who had traveled out of state, so not surprising. They were not requiring hospitalization from the state health department report. There's about 17 states that have identified a case. But the biggest thing that we know here is we've still got a lot of Delta variants, but we're kind of watching both as the state physicians, but nationwide, to sort of see if this transitions from Delta, which we've been dealing with since the summer, over to the new variant. And we don't know yet.
Yeah. So I've seen some reports from scientists who suggest that there could be a positive aspect of this, and that if Omicron becomes the more dominant variant, such that it kind of eradicates Delta, that could be a good thing because so far it appears to be less virulent, more transmissible, less virulent, and results in less severe disease. You have any thoughts on that or information on that?
That seems to be anecdotally what we have seen. Some reports out of South Africa, Norway, and some different countries have shown that it does have some breakthroughs, just like Delta did. Does seem to be slightly less severe, but we really are still in that kind of gray zone where we don't know, the big picture yet. But we hope so. Yeah. That would be nice.
Yeah. So how are we doing in the state of Mississippi with respect to hospitalizations, hospital capacity, ventilator access when needed, et cetera? I haven't heard as much concern coming out of public health officials along those lines. Are we in better shape now than we were not so long ago?
We are in decent shape with regards to COVID. The health department actually did a little bit of a statement yesterday when they talked about the new variant being found. We've seen a modest increase in total cases and hospitalizations over the last week or so, couple weeks, but overall we're still fairly low. Our biggest concern is staying in the winter, and so that's a lot of times when we see an increase in hospitalizations due to things like flu, pneumonia, upper respiratory type infections.
So is there is there concern amongst clinicians that we're going to likely be spending more time inside and closer to people as the winter sets in, and therefore we could see an increase in cases?
Absolutely. We're particularly concerned as we head into the holidays. We're not quite far enough out from Thanksgiving yet to see if that was going to give us an appreciable burst or bump. To kind of see that, but that's our concern heading into Christmas and kids being out of school, coming home from college, family gatherings. That's certainly a concern.
Yeah. The one thing that might be a bit of a saving grace for those of us in the South, I should say, is that the weather is predicted to be fairly mild for the winter. We talked about this on the program a couple of weeks ago, that the meteorologists are predicting a La Nina weather pattern, which means the jet stream stays further to our north, kind of draped across the northern tier of states, and everything below that is relatively mild and dry. So maybe that'll keep us more outside, and we won't be as inclined to be in close quarters and inside, which apparently does promote spread of disease.
Absolutely. I think that's a big thing. As we look at the holidays and we start to counsel people on what the smart things to do are, and that's what we know now over the last couple of years, stay outside, spread out, do those things. But certainly I hope that a milder weather pattern will produce good results for us on COVID.
All right. So along those lines, what is your recommendation for us to stay safe, stay protected? What measures should we take to do so?
The biggest thing is get vaccinated if you're not vaccinated. Get boosted if you're not boosted. The CDC did expand the booster guideline to basically every adult 18 and up. And that's 2 months after Johnson & Johnson or 6 months after the second dose of Pfizer or Moderna. So that's a big thing we're doing right now is boosting patients. Get your flu shot. The things that we know that we can do to help protect ourselves and our others is the number one thing. If you're sick, stay home. Don't host a big gathering. If you're sick, get tested. It's the same thing we say over and over, but it's especially important to drive it home right here as we go into holidays with grandma and everybody else and one living for Christmas.
Yeah. So what's the latest, Dr. Miller, in the medical community amongst epidemiologists and whomever studies this sort of stuff with respect to vaccine efficacy versus the Omicron variant?
As we can see, we've looked sort of worldwide at this. And what I said, my family physician in rural Mississippi, but this is a particular interest of me. We've seen pretty good efficacy. But again, the big thing we know right now is boosters are going to help. So that's sort of where we are right now, is driving home that point. Certainly people who have not been vaccinated yet need to be vaccinated, but immunity for all, everything we can do to add to it is going to help protect against this variant. And certainly that immunity, even if you were to get a breakthrough case, tends to lower your risk of having a severe case or requiring hospitalization.
What about post-contraction of the infection therapeutics and treatments? How are we looking there?
We've still got wide access to the antibody treatment, and that's kind of our priority. We are looking toward the oral medications. That's kind of the next thing we see, the pill for COVID.
Merck pill, yeah.
And,
yeah.
And seeing where it's going to fit in. We don't know exactly yet because we've got to see access and spread and those type things. But for Mississippians right now, it's going to be the antibody therapy if they're eligible. And most Mississippians are eligible. And they actually just expanded it to children.
Right. A lot of talk coming out of Washington from the president about testing and really encouraging folks to test at home. Have you got any recommendations on that? And how accurate are those tests? Are there any in particular that you're a fan of?
There are several tests available. There's a whole list of FDA-approved home tests. But most of the pharmacies and Walmarts and things like that around here do carry some of those tests. If the directions are followed, they're pretty good. They do tend to miss some of the early infections. But if somebody's got significant symptoms, it's certainly not a bad idea to keep a pack on hand at home. And if you're sick, especially if it's after hours, if it's the weekend, you can't easily access your physician or other provider to consider that. It's not ideal for everybody, but it's another tool in our toolbox. I keep a 2-pack at home myself.
Okay. So I assume in your practice, Dr. Miller, you're treating COVID patients? You have patients come and present, you test them, they've got COVID?
We do. So I do full practice family medicine down here in Jeff Davis County in Prentice. And we test for COVID. We treat COVID. We do the antibody infusions. We're next door to our hospital, and we actually do them there. We also have a centralized system through our employer, Hattiesburg Clinic, to get those done.
What has been your experience with respect to infection of vaccinated versus unvaccinated? It's still grossly unvaccinated people getting cases when I see positivity. The breakthrough cases I've seen pretty much across the board have been pretty mild. The few that I've seen that have had a more significant illness or required ER hospitalization or something like that, certainly older or immunocompromised, which I think reflects what we've seen as a state. Yeah. In your professional opinion, we got about 45 seconds here. Do you think we're going to see more variants?
I certainly do. And I think we're constantly looking at, genomic variation and things like that. And we see variants pop up. At the very beginning, we had 5 or 6 different types floating around. So just like the flu, just like other things, it's going to mutate along. The key is to get as many people immune as possible. And so we can kind of tamp that down.
Let's hope we get there sooner rather than later. Dr. Laura Miller, family medicine specialist, Hattiesburg Clinic, has been our guest. Thanks so much for joining us today, Dr. Miller. We'll talk soon.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Middays, we'll take a break right here. We'll come right back. We got more talk for you. Stay with